Hi guys, welcome back to Colorado Living. My name's Nicole Baker. Today we're going to be talking about my story on when I moved to Colorado and some of the things that I wish I would have known prior to moving here. If that's something that you're interested in, go ahead and keep on watching. But before we get started, you guys know I'm a licensed realtor here in this beautiful state. So if you're interested in moving and relocating, go ahead and reach out to me and my number is popping up below. But other than that, let's go ahead and get started in today's video. Okay guys, we're gonna go ahead and get started on why I moved to Colorado. First things first, if you don't know me and or you haven't watched any of my videos or know nothing about Arizona, I am from Arizona originally and it is extremely hot there and there's absolutely nothing to do because you can't really go outside because it's just so damn hot. Anyways, me and my boyfriend decided that we wanted to move to Colorado, and it was probably a couple-year process that we had been thinking about it, and we didn't know exactly when, where. It was just kind of like in the timeline, we're definitely gonna end up moving there at some point. So we had been visiting Colorado for probably 3 years, and I got really sad every single time I left because I seriously, from the first time I ever came here, I fell in love with it. It is gorgeous. It really reminds me of a place in Arizona that is north of Phoenix. It's called Flagstaff, and it is a small little college town, and it has tons of pine trees, and it is essentially in the forest. So it's a lot cooler up there too. So it's about 2 hours from Phoenix. And I have always thought of Denver as a massive, it was called Flagstaff. So if you've ever been there, it's basically a massive Flagstaff, and that is something that I absolutely fell in love with. I always loved Flagstaff, but I knew I would never live there just because of the fact that there's absolutely no jobs. It's just a small little college town. And being a realtor, you need lots of houses, and there's just not a lot of houses up there. It's mostly just apartments and townhomes and rentals and stuff for the college kids. So anyways, Denver is essentially just a massive, foresty town, I guess. It's like you get to live in the city, but you also get to experience all the nature, and that's just something that I fell in love with. I couldn't wait to come back every single time that I left. I was already planning the trip on my way out. So like I'm on the plane, like booking tickets for the next time I could come here. We came about 5 to 6 times a year for a few years. And then every single year I would say, oh, we're gonna move here in 5 years. We're gonna move here in 5 years. But slowly over time, it would be like not even 5 years, or not even a year had passed, and I'm like, maybe 2 years, maybe a year. Okay, I'm never spending another summer in Phoenix again. Get me out of this state, like I'm moving in the next 6 months. And that's what I did. So I started getting my real estate license and preparing for my job here. That's something that a lot of my clients, that is super important to them, because obviously a lot of the times you can't purchase a home unless you have already had your job in place in your new state. So if you need a state-specific lender, I can definitely help you guys out with that. But a job is really important to a lot of people, especially if you want to qualify. So I knew that the first thing I needed to get done was get my license here. So I went ahead and did that. I was already licensed in Arizona, so it was a super easy transition. Not much testing or anything like that, but went ahead and got my license here, got it all set up. Then the next part was the movers. And I sympathize with anyone that's moving out of state right now. It is one of the hardest things you will ever do. It is no joke, and I don't have that much stuff, and I didn't even have a house to sell. I was renting my house out in Arizona, so I didn't have much to do, but it was overwhelming to the max, especially if you have never done this before, just like I had never moved out of state. So I have learned tons and tons of information that has really helped me and helped a lot of my clients end up relocating, because it's no joke. It is one of the most stressful times. You are potentially selling your house. You're packing your house, you're getting a U-Haul. U-Hauls are not cheap, guys, especially depending on what type of transportation you use for your move. So whether it be, pods, U-Haul, you drive it yourself, or you get the pods dropped off and you fill it up and then they drive it over here. There's something that always happens. I can guarantee you that. I've had clients relocate in the past where their U-Haul came down to it, where they're, packing up their house because they had sold it and they are moving to their new state, and the U-Haul place calls them and says, oh, instead of it was the biggest U-Haul that you could get. Oh, we can only give you 2 U-Hauls that are half the size each. So say it was a 30-foot U-Haul, instead of giving them a 30-foot U-Haul, they're gonna give them 2 15-foot U-Hauls. She's like, how am I going to have 2 people drive these U-Hauls and our cars? So again, another thing, cars, whether you're shipping your cars or driving your cars, wherever you're coming from, it's a whole hassle getting hotels from every single spot. There's a lot more that goes into it. And then when you get here, if you had already purchased a home, is your house ready to go? Have the title companies synced up on both sides? Are the funds ready? All of the things. There's a lot of different variables when it comes to selling a house in one state and moving to another state and buying a new house. So it's really important that you have someone that understands the relocation process, whether that be me or not. It doesn't matter. You want someone that has relocated in the past, because they can definitely walk you through every single step, and it'll be a lot smoother of a process, and you won't end up potentially homeless or having to stay in a hotel, hopefully. That would be absolutely horrible, especially after the whole move. It is stressful enough, let alone having to pack your whole life into a hotel or keeping your U-Haul for longer, or if that's even possible, or whatever it may be, right? There's a lot of variables. So anyways, we move to Colorado, we get unpacked, we get settled, and now it's time to start our new lives. And we're kind of getting used to all the things about Colorado that you don't know. Especially, there's a big difference between, and something I realized, there's a big difference between traveling here a lot and visiting tons, where I felt like I knew Colorado pretty well from just visiting so many times over the years, to actually living here and driving yourself around and seeing things for yourself. Huge difference. I'm gonna kind of go into some details on things that I didn't necessarily know before moving here, that I think that it could be important to you, it could not be important to you, but I like to mention these things because there's a lot of things that I didn't know before coming. Okay guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I have about 10-ish, maybe 15 things here that I slowly started to realize over time, and some of the things I realized very quickly. But first things first, we're gonna go over cell reception. Something I never noticed whenever I was visiting here, and maybe it was because I was never really on my phone while I'm visiting, but the cell reception, depending on where you are, could be absolutely horrible. I quickly realized this being a realtor, because there's nothing more annoying than having a call drop when that's your entire business, right? So Southeast Aurora is, some pockets of it, we'll say, have absolutely terrible cell reception when you're driving around. Obviously, when you're home and you have Wi-Fi, completely different story. But if you are not on Wi-Fi, you are going to have a hard time in certain spots, especially moving in towards the mountains. You pretty much need to have your maps already downloaded onto your phone, like the olden days, I would say, because you will just get completely lost. I know a lot of the times I have been up in the mountains showing houses and absolutely no cell reception. It's the worst and really, really frustrating when it comes to that, because we're so used to having our phones for everything and easy access to, if you have a question and you wanna look it up on the internet real quick, you can totally do that. Versus certain parts here, you absolutely can't. So something to keep in mind when you're looking at homes is cell reception is really important to you, and having that all the time. You wanna make sure that you ask me what places have the best cell reception. And I have Verizon. So Verizon is, obviously, you guys know, Verizon's superior pretty much everywhere, and I still have an issue. And I live in Southeast Aurora, so maybe that's why. I also go to Parker a lot, never have issues there. Lone Tree, Centennial, most of those places don't really have it. For some reason, Southeast Aurora just has absolutely horrible cell reception. I don't understand. Moving on to the next thing, potholes. I don't know if Phoenix just took really good care of their roads, but I'm pretty sure they didn't. There are potholes everywhere, and they are really hard to avoid sometimes, depending on what area you're in. If you're in a newer development, obviously the roads are pretty well kept, and even some of the more high-end areas, I would say, they upkeep their roads, but a lot of the times there are a lot of potholes. And something that I believe, don't fact check me, or please fact check me, I guess, when it snows, because Arizona didn't snow, so I wasn't used to that, right? That cold water starts sinking into any cracks that are in the cement. And when it snows, it freezes and expands and slowly starts to create the potholes over time. That is why there is a lot of repairs going on the roads here, majority of the time, because they are fixing the potholes after the winter time. Another thing, you may not have tolls in your area. So tolls is something that I just never realized while I was visiting here, because I was never the one driving. So tolls are essentially fees that the government charges you to use these special highways or freeways or whatever. It is depending on if you get your annual pass or not. I believe it's $2-ish per toll you pass. If you're familiar with tolls, you totally get what I'm trying to say, but essentially there could be a toll that's I think it's maybe like $2.05, and then there's some that are $4. So on your maps, whenever you are driving around, you will now have the option, if you never had tolls before, to go ahead and have tolls on or tolls off. I highly suggest getting your annual pass for the tolls. It just makes your life so much easier, and you can skip a lot of the traffic because a lot of people don't like to take the toll roads. Again, totally worth it to me, and just depending on where you're going. I was really used to just hopping on the freeway anywhere I went in Phoenix. Here, I try to avoid the tolls if I can. If I'm not in a rush, there's really no point, and then you also get to drive through all the pretty neighborhoods and see a lot more things. So I try to avoid the tolls if I can, but if I'm going to the airport or things that just it makes a huge difference on time. So if it's gonna take me 10 extra minutes to not take a toll, I'm just gonna take a toll. So something to know if you are coming from somewhere that doesn't have tolls. They are kind of annoying, but also they end up being a little bit more convenient because people try to avoid them, so I try to get on them to avoid traffic. Going into the next couple things, car insurance and tags. Something I've noticed, and it could be different for every place and every person. When I went to go switch my car insurance and my tags over to Colorado tags, I realized quickly that they are a lot more expensive than Arizona, so something that you want to research in advance. Another thing, a lot of people call me and say, oh, I only want a single story. That is very, very hard to find here in Colorado, and I realized that quickly because my parents also wanted to move here, and that was something that was really important to my dad because he has bad knees from construction work, and he didn't want to have to walk upstairs, or he would be okay if the master bedroom was on the first floor. There's pretty much, I would say maybe 10% of houses in every neighborhood are single story, so they're a lot harder to come by. They'll still typically have that basement, but most of the bedrooms being on just one floor, they're a little bit harder to come by, and also they end up being a little bit pricier because people want them so badly. So that's something to keep in mind too if you have anyone that is hard of walking, or you just don't like walking up the stairs like I don't. Something to keep in mind when it comes to looking for homes and letting your realtor know that you want a single story if possible. Moving on to the next thing, not every house has AC. So here in Colorado, it's a little bit cooler, so you definitely want to check, especially if it's an older home. Does it have central air conditioning? Because I know for me, that's an absolute must. I don't care how perfect the weather is here. I need AC because when I get hot and I want to cool it down. The next thing that we're gonna go on to, new builds don't always have fencing. So something that I noticed very quickly here is not every house has fencing, even if it's just a typical standard home. I am very familiar with no fencing when it comes to 55 plus or active adult communities. In Phoenix, that's like a huge retirement hub. So a lot of the neighborhoods there are 55 plus and pretty much none of them would have fencing. But here, even in a typical standard neighborhood, they don't have fencing, and I thought that was so weird. Fencing doesn't always come standard with the builder. So you wanna make sure that if you're getting a new build, if fencing is really important to you, you want to research those costs on what it's gonna cost. Typically, if you face a major road on the backside, or like, not necessarily a major road, but you know, a road that goes throughout your neighborhood, that side will be covered. But if you want to get fencing in between each other's yards from your neighbor, that costs money, and a lot of people end up going in halvesies with their neighbors, but it's just something that you have to discuss. And going into the next thing about fencing, there's a couple different styles. So for me and my family, I don't really mind, I only have cats, so I don't mind having the open fencing. My mom, on the other hand, hates the idea of having open fencing where they can see into each other's yards. Like, she can see into her neighbor's yard and her neighbor can see into her yard. She doesn't like that. So that's something that you want to keep in mind when you're looking into neighborhoods, especially if you're doing virtual tours with me and that's important to you. Definitely let me know, because I will love to point those out. There is a couple different styles of fencing, and each one costs a little bit different whenever it comes to potentially going in halves with your neighbor, if that's something that you want. Going into the next thing, builders don't always include your basement to be finished. So not every basement is finished. If you're familiar with basements at all, Arizona had pretty much no basements, so each state is a little bit different. I know Texas doesn't necessarily have tons of basements either, and it has to do with the type of soil that's there. Arizona has really hard soil, and that's costs more to dig up, so that's why they don't have a lot of basements. It cuts costs a lot when it comes to not having a basement, because obviously that just adds to square footage, keeps the homes cheaper if there's no basement. So anyways, in Colorado, there's tons of basements and they're not always finished. So something that you might want to keep in mind when it comes to costs, if you want that extra square footage finished, how much is it going to cost to get it all completed? If you want to add a bedroom, that's a potential down there too. So something to keep in mind again, if there's 3 bedrooms on the listing and it's an unfinished basement, can I add a 4th bedroom downstairs in the basement area and get it finished? It's just something to keep in mind. So if you come across a 3 bedroom that you absolutely love, but you need a 4th bedroom, or you're going to need a 4th bedroom in the future for an office, a baby room, whatever, that's an option as well. Going on to the next thing, the different types of basements. So I slowly started to notice the walkout basements. Those are absolutely gorgeous. If you're familiar with what I'm talking about, it basically looks like a 3-story building from the back. Your basement walks out to your backyard, and you kind of have that porch that walks down, and then you have your typical 2-story, or I guess it would look like a 3rd story from the backside. But that is a walkout basement, and they typically cost a little bit more. When you're getting a new build, the lot premium will be more expensive. When you are looking at houses that are considered resale, so someone has lived in it in the past, then it will typically be a little bit more expensive than the house next door that just had the standard basement. Standard basement is, it just has, you know, the window wells that kind of open up, so in case of a fire, you can always leave. Those don't typically cost any extra. And then the other type of basement is garden level. So garden level is when you kind of have your windows peeking out, so you can see into the backyard from your basement, but you can't necessarily walk out through like an Arcadia door or a sliding glass door. Going on to the next thing, If you are 55 plus or you enjoy active adult communities, there are not a ton of active adult communities here, and typically they still have steps that you have to use in order to get to your front door. Something I noticed quickly again, a lot of front doors are not necessarily level with the ground. You have about 5 steps in order to get to your front door. So something to keep in mind if you need wheelchair access, that's something that you'll have to add on if it's important to you. Traffic. So how the traffic works here, and it's a lot different than Phoenix, there's a lot of little side roads in between neighborhoods. So that typically is how, you kind of cut all the traffic. Your map will take you a different route every single time. My parents, whenever they visit, they're like, oh my God, the map takes me a different way every time I come to your house. What's the problem? Are you ever gonna learn, how would I learn where to go? Because it's just so confusing. And the reason for that is because the map is trying to help you avoid traffic as much as possible. Again, going back to the toll roads, I noticed very quickly, take the toll roads if you want to avoid more traffic. Some of these roads that have no tolls are very, very populated and end up with traffic sometimes, at 1 o'clock, when that's not like the typical traffic time. So something to keep in mind as well. Okay guys, hopefully you enjoyed today's video and hopefully I provided tons of information that you might have not known otherwise. It is a very stressful time in your life when you're relocating, especially if it's a, quick move that you have to make, or a forced move necessarily, especially if you're in the military and you don't get to pick where you go, right? But I feel like I'm very qualified to help you guys relocate here because I did it myself, and I can help you through all the stuff that you might not know is going to happen when you move here, and I would hope that I can make it a little less stressful for you and more happy. Again, you guys are moving to a beautiful state, and anyone who lives here is lucky to live here. So if you guys have questions, my number's popping up on the screen. I love talking to you guys and I love helping you guys relocate. So go ahead and reach out. But until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!